Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this fourth and last event of our cycle dedicated to sustainable blue economy topics. Today's discussion is about ports, hubs of the new blue economy, and how can ports transform themselves to meet environmental challenges. My name is Ludivine Serrière, and I'm in charge of exploring topics related to the sustainable blue economy at Leonard. For the one who don't know Leonard, Leonard is the foresight and innovation platform of the VINCI Group. Our mission in VINCI is to explore new trends, new businesses and technologies, and see how it will impact our cities and territories in the future. I will quickly introduce SOA, Sustainable Ocean Alliance, our partner for this event cycle. SOA is a non-profit organization based in San Francisco. Their goal is to support innovation and entrepreneurs in the ocean tech sector. They do that through two different programs. The first one, the Ocean Leadership Program, and the Ocean Solution Accelerator. So far, they have supported about 50 startups. And over the last few months, we shared a lot about different topics, marine renewable energies, climate change, or coastal resilience. And today we are interested in maritime infrastructures and especially ports. That's why we have a third partner today, Energy Observer, and I will let Louis-Noël Viviès, Managing Director of Energy Observer, present himself and his organization to introduce today's topic in a few seconds. Then we will have a 45 minutes roundtable moderated by Conor Fürstenberg, partner at Fürstenberg Marine Advisory, to talk about ports transformation and sustainable challenges. And we will close the session with the presentation of 3 solutions of startups that work for the future of our oceans. We know that each port is unique, but we need to cross experiences and ideas to develop the most relevant ones. That's why we are here today. And I will let Louis-Noël, I leave you the floor. You can start with your presentation. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to meet you and to be with you today. I am Louis-Noël Viviès. I come from the offshore racing industry, let's say. And a lot of the members of Energy Observer come from the offshore racing. Actually, we have spent a lot of budgets in to go faster, sailing, on the America's Cup, on the Volvo Ocean Race, on big multi-hulls. And let's say in 2015, we decided that probably if we could use the same amount of sponsoring that we spent just to go faster, if we could spend it in developing clean technologies for the maritime world, it might be, a higher purpose anyway. So we decided to shift with Victorien to this project. And the Energy Observer actually is the former big catamaran from Sir Peter Blake. She went around the world racing. I cannot go forward on my slides. I don't know if it's normal. Can you go forward with my slides on your side? I can jump to the next one. No, it doesn't work, and I can't hear you.
I think you have to do it from your side because it's your screen.
Yeah, but it didn't work. Sorry for that.
You can close maybe and reopen your presentation.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That's it.
I've got something. Yes, at least. That's a film. I have an issue with my Google. That's a short film. Is the video running?
Nope. I think maybe we're going to have issue with the video.
Yeah, okay. So let's say, just to introduce what the Energy Observer is. So now it's a group of companies. You have the first project, which was Energy Observer. It was the first hydrogen-powered zero-emission vessel on which we developed some technologies, solar, wind, hydro generation. So you will have some more details. And we have a foundation which is dedicated to education and to promote the 17 SDGs of the UN, because we are the first French ambassador for the SDGs. We have a production company because we produce a lot of films. We invest a lot in R&D, but we invest a lot in communication too. And the last one is Energy Observer Development that we have launched in 2019, and which is developing hydrogen generator systems for the maritime world and for the outdoor users. So it's a industrial branch, because our partners were fed up to see 3D designs and PPTs, but no actual systems. So they decided to invest with us in this new generation of energy systems. So, the wings that we are developing are the theme are the wings for using on a plane. They're fully automatic. They are just designed to be used by any kind of crew. So you don't need to be a sailor to use them. They are fully automatic. Their name is the Ocean Wings. They have been developed by Eiras, but they are the only ones which are actually developed and used every day on the ship. We have them for about 3 years now, and they are very, very efficient, especially with the electric propulsion. These are the batteries. We used lithium-ion batteries, quite standard. We didn't take any risk on the batteries because it's not our job. We focus on hydrogen solutions mainly. But so we have 100 kilowatt hours batteries on board. This is the desalinization, because we have a full hydrogen chain on board. So we take the seawater, we desalt it on a 3 stages desalinization system, and then we electrolyze this very pure water. That's the compression stages, that we use to compress the hydrogen once it is electrolyzed, because we have the 350 bars tanks on board. It is the same, pressure as in most of the buses everywhere. So it's quite a standard pressure. We use different kind of fuel cells, but now we are working a lot with Toyota. Why Toyota? Because we believe that we need to use standard industrial components if we want to get reasonable cost of the system. If you use only custom-made, very specific fuel cells or components, you will never achieve an affordable system. And our mission is to develop systems which can be used by all the communities, all the maritime communities, for the passenger vessels, for the fishermen, and even now for the shipping industry. That's the energy management system. I goes too fast anyway, which drive all the systems. So we have been around the world since 2017 when we launched the boat. We've been around France, around the Mediterranean. We went up north to the Spitzberg, and then we crossed the Atlantic. We were in California. We crossed the Pacific. We were in Singapore, which is a very interesting place because it's probably the first bunkering harbor in the world. And this year we're going to cross the Indian Ocean down to South Africa. And next year we will be in Brazil, New York, and we'll be back in Paris for the games, for the Olympic Games. Now we organize big events because we want to raise awareness about all the opportunities of the renewable energies and the hydrogen. So, for instance, we have lighted up the Eiffel Tower last year, and we have this big village that we take with us everywhere around the world to welcome schools and universities and so we participate in most of the professional shows and exhibitions with our systems, just to convince the community that it is simple and reliable. And because we strongly believe that the hydrogen by 2050 will have a key role, providing up to about 20% of the final energy demand, creating millions of jobs, and most of it, it's one of the best way to reduce the CO2 emissions. So we have developed this new cargo ship because our boat is beautiful. It's a carbon fiber multi-hull, with a big history. It's an iconic catamaran. But the thing is that there were very few communities, especially in Asia and in the Pacific, which could, figure out how to use this kind of carbon fiber catamaran. So we decided to go one step ahead and to work on a container cargo, a small cargo. This is not the final design, of course. It's one of the first ones using the ocean wings. But now we are investing a lot of time and even a lot of investment in this project with CMA-CGM, Air Liquide, and many other partners. And the idea is to develop this kind of relatively small cargo because it is about 1/3 of the world fleet in terms of output of power. So we will develop a 7 megawatt fuel cell system using liquid hydrogen. And that's the first time that we will be able to have an absolute zero emission ship. The launching is scheduled to be in 2026, 27. And we hope to be able to launch about 3 of these ships quite fast, quite quickly after the first one. But for these ships, we need to think global now, and especially with the we need to think about the maybe I have a 3D picture to show you. No, it didn't work. I can go to the next one. So we have to think about the infrastructures and the harbor, of course. So I can go to the next harbor page. I get it. So for instance, we are working on different options in Le Havre. In Le Havre, you got this huge industrial area with a petrol refinery, with the CMA-CGM terminal where they load all the containers, and you've got quite close. You've got one of the biggest electrolyzer in the world, which will be launched in Port Jérôme. It's about 30 kilometers away from Le Havre, alongside the Seine River. And so we will have some clean green hydrogen produced with this 200 megawatts electrolyzer in Port Jérôme. And we have the chance that there is a pipeline providing hydrogen for the Total refinery, which is in the bottom of this page. And the pipelines are going very close to the loading dock where CMA-CGM is doing its operation. So the idea is to invest in a liquefier here to take the gaseous hydrogen coming from the electrolyzer and to liquefy it there to have a local liquid hydrogen storage, and then to be able to bunker the boat. And the boat has to be, bunkered in CMOPs, in simultaneous operations, because for most of the transportation companies, they need to bunker while they are loading the boats, the ships. So we have 3, but now we have about 4 different options in this area. And one of the options is to convert the sorry, it goes too fast. Anyway, is to use the former coal factory. There is a big coal power plant in Le Havre, and the idea is to use some land from this big coal plant to set up liquefier and the liquid hydrogen storage. Of course, because we were in Singapore about 6 months ago, we have learned a lot about these huge challenges over there, because Singapore is probably the first bunkering harbor in the world, and the challenges are totally different from Le Havre, and I think it's totally different from Marseille and from Fos. So the idea is to think globally, locally, because of course you don't have a big electrolyzer or a big liquefier in every port. It's very far from that. Even if there are some big projects of investment over there, but why we work a lot on Le Havre, it's just because in Le Havre you've got all these things together. You've got the hydrogen production locally. You've got this loading facilities and this CMS-CGM terminal, and because you've got all there together, it's probably one of the best options that we have today. Sorry for the slides, because I have quite issues with my Chrome application, but that's what just I wanted to tell you about Energy Observer. So I stop the screen. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's finished. Sorry for the issue with my Chrome app. No, I don't know why. It's very difficult today.
We're all struggling with the technology. Shall I go ahead then, Ludivine?
Yeah.
So with us now for this section, for the next 45 minutes or so, we have Ruben Eiras. Catch me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Thank you, Ruben, who's the Secretary General of Fórum Oceano, the Portugal Blue Economy Cluster. So really interested to hear some of your thoughts. We have Thierry Ducellier, the SPD Executive Head of Sales at Sinay, and myself. I'd like to hear a little bit about you guys. Ruben, could you give us a short rundown of who you are and what you're doing?
Very well. So thanks. First of all, many thanks for the invitation to be in this webinar, and which is the theme is personally of the utmost importance, for advancing a true blue sustainable economy. So my name is Ruben Eiras. I am the Secretary General of Fórum Oceano. What is Fórum Oceano? Fórum Oceano is the Portugal's Blue Economy Cluster. We exist for 12 years. We represent 50% of Portugal's blue GDP, and 140 members from all sectors of the blue economy. So fisheries, aquaculture, shipping. So we are a multi-sectorial cluster, because blue economy is in itself, a multi-sectorial mega sector in a way of saying. Formally to this, I would say, role that I have, I was Director General for Maritime Policy of the Ministry of Portugal, Ministry of the Sea of Portugal, and also I was advisor to the Minister of the Sea in the areas of energy, innovation, and industry. So that is, I would say, the context of Fórum Oceano.
Yeah, that's fantastic to have you here today. Thierry, would you like to tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. Thanks a lot. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Thanks a lot. And again, thank you, VINCI, Leonard, and SOI for your support on having us. So my name is Thierry Ducellier. I'm Sinay's head of sales, and I'm glad to be presenting tonight. I'm based in Normandy, so northwest of France, at Sinay's headquarters. And at Sinay, we provide a data collaboration platform that help the maritime industry better communicate and understand the impact of their activities on the environment. So I have the pleasure to manage our sales team, which actually work closely with the ports on the matter. On my side, I have a sales and IT background. I've been working for an American software company for about 10 years before moving to Normandy, where I have the chance to live by the shore. And from there, I look at a job that could combine my skills and passion for the ocean, and Sinay appears, which I joined about a year and a half ago. And nowadays, we mainly focus on offshore projects, especially with working with wind farms and port extension. And our goal is to make sure this will not impact too much the environment. So every day with the team, we work on new technology and digital tools to provide the stakeholders with enough information, which is key actually to add intelligence in the business. Sorry.
Oh, this is fascinating, and I can't wait to get into this in more detail. How on earth does that work? So I'm really looking forward to hearing about this. So for my own part, my name is Conor Fürstenberg Stott, and my wife and I, Sophia, we have a little micro consultancy helping we set up to help the maritime industry and the wider ocean economies to become more sustainable. We're located here in the south of Sweden. A lot of our efforts are involved with fulfilling the role of maritime directors for the Ammonia Energy Association, and that's an extremely interesting place to be, I can tell you that much. But we also are involved in all other various other kind of ocean sustainability projects as well. I started off working at sea. I was in heavy shipping, and I ended up in Copenhagen managing an offshore asset in West Africa before I left that and came into what I'm doing now. I've had the privilege of working on and around the ocean for all of my life. And I just want to tell a little story about kind of one of the salient moments that got me where I am now, out of heavy industry, if you like, and into kind of assisting heavy industry in a blue transition. I was away with my family whale watching back in the noughties, whale watching in Canada. And I went, after my holiday, after my leave, I went back offshore West Africa, and I was watching humpbacks migrating through the oil field. And I saw far more whales far closer up than I did whale watching. I was kind of ironic that I'd spent this money, and then I went to work and I saw whales. They were spy hopping. It was very entertaining. It was, and actually every August and September they would migrate through the field. But what struck me was the way that this was a situation where the natural world was going around us in the most manifest way, and it kind of it stuck with me ever since. You know how this kind of it made me think, and I was like, the natural world is going around us, under us, and over us, trying to carry on what it's been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. And we are constantly putting things in its way here, there, and everywhere else. And as our activities and our populations increase, this is just becoming more and more a problem. And it's a problem because we don't really listen to the science when it tells us how intertwined and how important our ability to maintain the natural balance on the planet is for the survival of the natural world and our own survival. So when it comes to shipping, where we are now, trying to help shipping make this transition as part of the global transition, I think that it's good to just say it out there. Shipping is extremely important. Over 80% of everything, 85, whatever you listen to, has been on a ship at some point, from raw materials to finished goods and to everything in between, passengers. And then you have I'm just thinking about cargo shipping. You've the fishing industry, you've the offshore industry, you've recreation. It's an enormous place. It's an enormous amount of activity out there. And shipping is extremely efficient mode of transport, but it is also a very, very high volume. So it is contributing up to about 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And we have to do something about that. But it also doesn't exist exclusively as in terms, let's say, of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. It doesn't exist on its own. The climate issue, I mean, it exists in relation to them, and we have to see this as a systemic problem as well. And this is extremely important. So ports, the role of the port in shipping and in all other ocean industries is absolutely essential. If you go back 300 years, the port was a place where a lot of the business of trade was done, as well as the mechanics of trade. And maybe that's changed. The business is done elsewhere. It's done online. It's done in a different way. The ports used to be a place where they had market stalls and where people are buying and selling a lot of things actually at the port. But the ports are still there. The interface between sea and land is still there. And it is only getting bigger and bigger. And it still exists as a focal point for the activity where we interact with the sea and with all the economy that's on the sea. And we are starting to, we're not starting, and sure, in your cases, we're doing a lot more than starting, but we're understanding this more fully in the shipping industries. And we're saying the port has to play a very, very important role in this. And really interesting example of technology, bringing technology in here and digitalization. I read this morning that Clarkson's, the big market intelligence house for shipping, have started a strategic partnership with Signal, which is a application-based nudging system for maritime safety. But they started a strategic partnership around decarbonization. And I thought it was really interesting that you're getting these. 5 years ago, these kind of relationships would be unheard of, and they're starting to come in now in the maritime industry. So I think that for the audience, I think it's a good idea to spend a little time just understanding what a port is. And Ruben, how would you define a port? What are we talking about here? I think you're muted, fortunately.
It happens.
So, as you stated very well, Conor, the port is the main, interface between land and sea, and of course, it's it's an obvious fact, but what that I would say fact impacts what is the evolution for a blue economy. So, if you face the port only as a logistical hub, so as at its core function, well, it's nothing more than that. And you do your cargo handling, your people handling. You have to be more efficient. With less emissions and so on, and job is done. Then there is the other concept, is to be ports as hubs of blue economy. And what does that mean? When you look, briefly looking at the history of ports, ports are and were the engines of urban development and also of cities' identity. So ports then, of course, with the evolution of technology, and also with the cargoes being, especially in the cargo area, being bigger and bigger and bigger, you have to there was a divorce from the port, as that's another, it's like entering in another country in certain cities. And that connection between what was the port for the local city or the region was lost. Also, if you look to the fishing ports, because those are, we talk about also when you think about the port, the first port that comes to your mind is the commercial ports, but we should not forget the fishing ports. And those are the last ones that really, have a strong link and deep link with the identity of the people, of the populations that live in that area. But they have because their activity, their traditional activity, is in decline or seriously limited because of the sustainability issues regarding, fish stocks. So where do we go from here? So I think we have to segment, and this is what the project that I'm going to talk about, that Fórum Oceano is co-leading, is doing, is to differentiate what are, the ports, the big ports, commercial ports, that are really in the big league of cargo and people handling. And then you have the small and medium-sized ports that cannot compete directly in the people and cargo handling. They don't need to compete in that. They need to refine their other specializations where they can be competitive, that is directly linked to their geography or the ocean area where they are located, or due to a certain characteristics of their interface between the ports, infrastructure, and sea. Concretely saying, ocean renewable energies, floating offshore wind. You need ports, facilities that are designed in a way that can, do the operations and maintain the operations for that kind of infrastructure. Aquaculture, well, some onshore aquaculture area facilities, for example, fishing ports can be converted into that for those functions. Most of these ports are situated in areas where the water is clean, where the water is pure, because there is no, big industrial activities around. Pure water is, and clean water, key for sustainable aquaculture, either onshore or offshore. And most of these ports already have the pumping water systems that were used for the fish processing industry. They can be reused and reutilized and renewed for onshore aquaculture. If you look, for example, to blue biotech or other areas of aquaculture beyond fish aquaculture, like algae farming or macroalgae. So there is a lot of the value chain that has to be explored. So what we are doing, very briefly, is the Atlantic Smart Ports Blue Acceleration Network. I don't know if I can share my screen. I will try to do it. So this is I would say, an European project that is financed. I will be very brief, don't worry. That is financed by the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund. Are you seeing the slide?
No, not yet.
Not yet? Well, probably doesn't work. Okay. So I will then tell you very briefly. So this is an European project financed by the EMFF, the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund. Sustainable Ocean Alliance is one of the strategic partners. We have, so it's a consortium of 15 entities, is led by Beta I. It's one of a Portuguese consultancy company, and it's a consortium of 15 entities that come from Portugal, Spain, France, Netherlands, Norway, US, and the US. And one is the main aim is to build an accelerator platform built on ports, where ports of medium-sized ports, where ports function as a networked, you could say, Silicon Valley for accelerating blue economy. So what are the results until now? We have identified 10 innovation challenge areas in 33 ports from the Atlantic, from Portugal, Spain, France, Netherlands, and Ireland. And in these 33 ports, we have identified 147 pilots that can be implemented, that are needs from the pilots' needs from the ports. So there are needs that were identified by the ports, and these needs come from being efficient in their operations, as well as ports as hubs for ocean energies, ports, being catalyzers of natural capital. We have ports that want to have sea forests and other type of and use their infrastructures as natural capital catalyzers. For example, the quays being redesigned in a way they attract fauna and flora using different materials. So maintaining the integrity of a structure, but being catalyzers of natural capital. And now we have identified 70 startups from a pool of 200 that will be able to implement these pilots. We'll have the boot camp of Aspen, so that's the acronym of the program, in probably next January next year, where we will match the startups with the ports, the 33 ports, and the investors and corporates. So who wants to invest in the pilots that are going to be selected to be implemented by the startups? So this is a concrete example of what we are doing. You can consult all of this in the Aspen site. It's aspban.eu. And you have there the access to the Pilots Bootcamp microsite, where you have all the 10 innovation challenges, and you can consult by each country the pilots that the ports want to deploy. And it's in 10 different areas. And it was in the challenges that were identified by the ports. It was not, a series of very well-educated people and very intelligent and smart inside the room that invented the pilots. It
was the ports themselves. Yeah. But this sounds fantastic and very far-reaching as well. I didn't know there was such a kind of a global and united initiative like that going on, actually.
Yeah,
but I'd also like to.
Sorry to interrupt, but to be very quick. We have been, I would say, doing a lot of groundwork. So this is not easy to do. It's ports have a specific culture, and you have to build trust for them to build that bridge for innovation.
So that's a very interesting. That's a very interesting point. Sorry, Ruben. I think we should just like to carry on a bit round, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Thierry, we were talking earlier about what roles do ports fulfill overall?
There are a lot of roles. I mean, it's an interesting question because it implies that we are able to list everyone involved in the port, and honestly, we could take the whole day to do that. You talked, Ruben, about the offshore wind farms industry that is on the port. So does it take part of the port decision? We have the municipality around that is usually the owner. But does it mean that they can decide whatever they want? You have also truck companies that unload cargo. So there are a lot of stakeholders within the port area. So the roles are very hard to define. But a good way to do it, though, could be to start from the sea to the land. Let's say we can follow the supply chain. But even there, it's complicated because you'll have the shipping line, but you can also consider the wind farm itself that gives electricity to the port. Yeah. And then you have the tugboats operators, the marine contractors, the harbor master office, etc. So the point is what's being highlighted here is the fact that the port faces a big difficulty when it comes to sharing information because of so many stakeholders.
Yes.
But something, just something important that talking with port we've highlighted is that in the end, an unexpected role is the one from ourselves, citizens and consumers, because we have kind of the most important role within all the chain, since we need our package in 24 hours within our door, even though it comes from China. Or when we leave by the port, we do have the power to complain and constrain. So a major role within the port is the user itself, the citizen.
Yeah. And I find it was interesting what you were saying, Ruben, like, we have to kind of divide a little bit the industrial from the fishing, and that's one kind of set categorization. Mm-hmm. They're located in a different place. The water might be cleaner. No, it shouldn't be, but it is. And the value proposition to the people living around the port is different in a fishing port because they're kind of generally more personally involved. And that value proposition is interesting. Louis, you said you had been to Singapore and you found that was a very extraordinary experience. And thinking about the value that ports create, again, it's very connected to the stakeholders, but what would you say about that? Are they not creating value? They should be in some cases.
It's very specific in Singapore because, as I told you, it is probably the first bunkering harbor in the world. You always have several hundreds ships just outside the port of Singapore, just waiting to bunker. So actually, it's a huge service station, with files of ships waiting to bunker. The thing is that to bunker these ships and these planes, because it's a big airport too, they need to have a huge refinery, which is on the island, on Jurong Island, on the west side of Singapore. I think it's the third biggest petrol refinery in the world. So let's say that Singapore harbor, most of the harbor is a huge service station, bunkering station. Of course, there is this big container harbor too, but as Ruben told, it's a kind of a different country. When you are in Singapore, just let's say 200 meters away from the container docks, and when you are in Jurong Island, you just cross a small, channel, and then you are in the Sentosa Island, which is a luxury hotel with, pristine beaches. But you just cross, half a mile, and you are in Jurong. And Jurong is one of the biggest refinery, most polluting area in the world. So, because Singapore is at the crossroads of many maritime routes, it could use this strategic position to have this huge growth in the traffic and in the production of fuels over there. But for us, it was very interesting because the Singapore authorities and the MPA, the marine authorities over there, are just thinking about solutions to try to start to decarbonize, the area. They work a lot on ammonia, like a lot of stakeholders. And we were there to try to convince them to use some of the hydrogen they use to refine the diesel and the gasoline. Why don't you use this hydrogen, which comes from natural gas, instead of manufacturing another polluting fuel? Why don't you use it directly in the fuel cells? Because they are producing some terawatts of energy every day just to bunker diesel ships, and it's not a huge investment to just to divert, let's say, 10% of this hydrogen produced over there to produce fuels, to use it directly into fuel cell system. And they agree on that, because the ammonia strategy needs a lot of hydrogen to, all the e-fuels, all the biofuels, most of them, they use huge amounts of hydrogen. So what we try to do is to simplify this chain. But we know that the investment that all the oil companies have made into these big, infrastructures need to have some years, to be paid off. But we just try to accelerate, and to convince them that in a short, let's say in about 3 years, there should be more and more liquid hydrogen cargo ships, and that there is an opportunity to use part of this production to make it green first, and then to use it directly into ships. And we have noticed that in France, for instance, when it is in Fos, in Dunkirk, or in Le Havre, most of the big investment from the government, from the big energy companies, goes into these industrial areas, because there is steel industry and there is concrete industry, and they are the two biggest consumers of energy. And all of them, they are very close to the ports. They are inside the port. If you look at Le Havre and or Fos or Singapore, it's first of all a huge industrial site, and the port is just, it's in the port because it's much easier, of course, to load and unload the ships with crude oil or refined oil, and to unload concrete. But the thing is that, as Ruben said, it's a totally different story when you talk about these big industrial ports, because for me, they are industrial sites before being ports. And then for the fishing industry and for the agricultural ports, it's a totally different story. But we focus on energy, and the investments in new energies are just, on these industrial sites. So that's why we focus on that, because that's where there will be the biggest liquefier, electrolyzers, and that's the only way to decarbonize the maritime transportation, is to have a cheap, green, or low or very low carbon hydrogen. It is the only way for us. Even if you use ammonia, you will need a huge amount of clean hydrogen. If you use fuel cells or combustion engines using hydrogen, you will need a huge amount of and affordable hydrogen. So it has to be in these industrial areas.
I would like to move on a little bit. I don't think we have time to go in any depth into the regulations that the maritime industry, the fishing industry, the offshore industry, the offshore oil and gas, the wind, whatever mariculture, whatever other industries. There's a whole load of regulation governing it now. The pollution, honestly, compared to what it was even recently, has dropped an awful lot. We've done an awful lot of very good things. But there's a focus now on digitalization, as before we can roll out, scale up the new fuels and these other technological solutions, there seems to be an awful lot of low-hanging fruit with digitalization. And I would really like to hear something about what is going on. What is this digitalizing of the maritime industry and of ports and of the ocean industries? How does that work? Thierry, I think that you're probably going to be straight in here with some answers.
It doesn't work very well, actually. That's the problem nowadays. It's because solution, as you said, there are a lot of hanging fruits. So it seems simple, but I don't know, and we don't know why, but it takes a lot of time, and we see that ports are facing a lot of barriers to move forward. And first of all, but I'm not going to be objective, because as a solution provider, we suffer from that. But there's clearly an issue with timing. You have so many complexity in administration, in politics, and so on, just to test a solution. Sometimes it's unbelievable. So and then comes the tenders, and you have then challenges or so-called solution hackathon, or I don't know. That are supposed to be helpful, but in the end, it's just a waste of time. And by the time the solution is chosen, it's sometimes already obsolete. So, of course, there are great solutions that can combine different applications to help ports. You can have things like port community system, and you have Sojet, for instance, who is doing a great job on the matter. But they don't address all the problem. And even though if you have a PCS, you have other solution aside, so you will lose time in training your staff to all of these solutions. Then you don't know where your reports are. Your solutions do not work together. And when it comes to sharing information with third parties, it's a kind of a nightmare. And what could be frustrating is that it's not about money. We could think it's that, but ports have money to invest, so they have the means to do it, to move forward, but somehow they still cannot do it properly.
So this is really interesting. And maybe is Ruben still here? I can't see him, so maybe he's lost connection or something. I was going to ask him if in his work and in the more policy and governmental side, oh, he's got a connection issue. Okay, well, maybe either of you would speak to that. I mean, when it comes to this difficulty, and again, it's just so many stakeholders and so many agendas, and even I'd say technically there's interface issues and data harvesting issues, etc. Is there any policy and regulation kind of helping? Do either of you know?
But if I may, as I said, policy will come from the citizen. Basically, if a port is suffering from a class action, lose a big trial and has to pay a huge fine, then things will change. So the government must place regulation, but they must place regulation because the citizen is asking for that. So that's key. When we get that, and when the port understands that, things shall move a bit faster, hopefully.
But there is a business case as well, often behind this, right? For efficiency should, in theory, be good for business.
Definitely, but in the end, hopefully, if you are more sustainable, you will be more competitive. But that's, there's room for debate there.
Yeah. Okay, but I mean, is there not, if you can get more efficient vessel operations, for instance, now, I'm sorry, I'm just seeing this very much from the cargo ship side of things, but there's an awful lot of waiting around at ports where vessels are sitting idle, waiting for a berth, and other coordination issues at ports, which I know are causing great inefficiencies and wasting fuel. There must be digital solutions which can feed into that and help to save money.
Yeah, absolutely. The key is sharing the information. So once you have the technologies that can easily place everyone at the same page regarding information, you can start. And then, of course, you will have technologies that can, for instance, predict ETA in port. So you don't have the vessels waiting, because you can alert the harbor master office that you are not going to arrive tonight at 6 p.m. but tomorrow at 4 a.m. So in the meantime, you can have another vessel entering in the port. You can, organize your supply chain like that. So the data is here, but if it's not shared properly, it's not going to work. So the technology is a tool, but it's not the end.
So there's this resistance of getting it in place. And Ruben, you missed a bit there, Ruben. But we were just wondering that Thierry was saying there are barriers. I mean, between the stakeholders, there are kind of just barriers in getting things organized around digitalized solutions for ports and for maritime in general. Are you seeing many initiatives in the initiatives you were mentioning there? Are you seeing many of them which are digitally oriented?
Yes, we have in our I would say projects, in the initiative that I have mentioned, we have about 38 pilots, multi-ports pilots, that are in the smart ports and digitalization. That's the main innovation challenge. And you have challenges from the digital twin of the ports, then also to have AI applied to the freight optimization, and so on. But here, what is the difference? As was said before, if you're working only in a specific context, that solution most probably will not be replicable or in another context. And here, ports, it's all about connectivity and interoperability. It's a huge, connected system. So when you deploy a solution and when you go for the digitalization of a port, or a certain part of an operation in the port, you cannot do it in just one port or test in one port. You have to test it in 5 or 6 or more. So this is what we are doing at Aspen, and we are going to also replicate in another sea basin in the Mediterranean with the Medban. Is the pilots are multi-ports. And why is that? To enhance and to, in a way, foster, not force, because if you force ports, you don't do nothing with them. You have to motivate that for them that they have to gain in working together, because it's kind of a paradox, because they have the ports tend to be, as shipping, very conservative and so on, but it's one of the industries that depends most on being open to connectivity, because if you don't have access, to certain routes or to you are completely done for. You're not. You have to be attractive to attract more, and being more attractive nowadays, not being closed, is being more open, is being more interoperable, is being more connected. Of course, with the security issues that you have to tackle when you go digital.
But that's very interesting, because you're talking about transparency, and Thierry was mentioning this as well, that in another form, that the public at the end of the day has to kind of push for these things. They have to want the ports to change, and they have to want the transparency in the data, and they don't want their goods shipped the wrong way because, or tons more CO2 emissions in the supply chain because one port was holding on to information and another wasn't. This kind of thing. We're coming close to closing here, and we're going to get into the pitches and presentations. Can I ask you each for a very fast last thought on the port as a hub for the blue economy? How does the port? Why does the port play this role as a hub for the blue economy? Thierry first.
Well, I think transition has to start somewhere, and but the thing is, the more the port will rely on growth perspective and align their success with their tonnage, the environment. And that's a fact. So maybe it's time to think about doing less but better. So to conclude, as I like to say, decrease is not decline. So maybe it's a thought that we could take with us.
Louis?
We are so focused on the energy issues that I will have, my energy perspective. I think that most of the big harbors, big ports today are mainly energy sites, and if we can go faster on the energy transition, it will be much easier than to decarbonize. And yes, we need a lot of digital and data, to optimize the operations. For instance, for the loading and unloading, or for bunkering in the CMOPs, in the simultaneous operations. But we need urgently to change, the way we burn fuel, and that will have many positive impact on the blue economy in the harbor, I guess.
Yep, and the ports supply the fuel. That's where they get your fuel. You don't get it out in the middle of the ocean yet.
Yeah,
that might change. But yeah, what do you think, Ruben, as a kind of a closing remark around blue ports of the future, pivotal role? I think you're muted again.
Ports are created by humans. Are human creation, and if they were I would say, the main catalyzers for connection, trade, and development in a certain model. Now they are, the ultimate testbeds for deploying the solutions that will transform energy and shipping, the way also we can get food from the ocean, sustainable food from the ocean, either by macroalgae or protein, and also the main outposts where you can do a proper ocean observation and monitoring.
Yes.
Are key for sustainability.
We're going to get caught on time, but I just think we can finish with our statement, the ultimate test bed. That says it all.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it's time to go through our solutions, startup solution, and for that we will start with the first one. Tor, are you here? Are you with us? Perfect. Out yourself and your solution. You have about 5-6 minutes.
Thank you very much. All right. So my name is Tor. I'm CEO and founder of a company called ECOsubsea. And I'm a strong believer that ports can play a vital role in both decarbonization for shipping, but also when it comes to stopping biodiversity collapse. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we are doing, but first about biofouling as a problem. So biofouling, that is grass, seaweed, and such that you can see to the right here on the ship that starts accumulating on hull already hours after it's put into water. For thousands of years, we've had poisoned ingredients in paints that we call anti-fouling paints that has prohibited this buildup. But in 2008, we saw a tectonic shift because then the poisonous ingredients in anti-fouling paints was prohibited. This has meant that biofouling has started becoming a huge problem when it comes to biodiversity collapse, because species are hitchhiking from one end of one ocean to another, and they're hitchhiking on the grass that sits on the bottom of ships. In 2017, we saw the first ship being stopped in New Zealand when it was supposed to do cargo operations in Tauranga port because it had non-native species, and it was therefore sent away till it were clean and could come back. This May, we saw the same happening on a fully booked cruise that was going to sail back and forth to Alaska, but it was stopped because it had too much biofouling on the bottom of the ship, and therefore the whole cruise was cancelled and the vessel needed to go to emergency dry dock to take off the biofouling. The problem of biofouling has increased, but the challenges of current solutions is quite harmful. Harmful for the manual divers that operates the equipment, and not the least harmful for the environment. So typically when biofouling is removed from a ship, it is also sent directly into the surrounding waters, and not only non-native species is taken off, but also microplastic and heavy metals in addition to the paint. And this have led to ships being stopped and operations also being stopped because the port doesn't want this pollution in port. So in ECOsubsea, we have made a solution to this. It's not like this, but more like this. It is a robot, and you can envision it like a massive vacuum cleaner. So we sell our service to ship owners, and we collaborate with ports. So when ships are coming in and doing loading and discharging, we put this vacuum cleaner that's 2 meters tall and 3 meters long into the water. And while the vessel is doing cargo operation, this vacuum cleaner goes back and forth over the hull. And then what's in the core of ECOsubsea is a patented principle that allows you to clean without damaging the coating, but you also continuously sand up the biofouling. So here, for example, in the port of Southampton, in collaboration with the port, we used this grass that was clinging to the hull in biogas production, so that instead of being a problem for hitchhiking non-native species and reducing the friction on ships or increasing it, we make biofouling to become an ingredient in green electricity for the surrounding households around the port. In January, we were put up to a challenge, and that was to clean the Charles de Gaulle in the port of Toulon. It was a marvelous vessel, and we took off about 2 tons of biofouling. The results were fantastic, with huge savings of fuel. And we typically see that our customers are saving some 10% of CO2 and fuel consumption because they are cleaned. But normally biofouling comes to the degree that you can see to the left here. An even bigger challenge is biofouling that grows on offshore structures that's been setting for a long time in the ocean. And in April, we were given a new challenge. That was for the Seadrill's oil rig that was going to stay in the port of Norway and Skipavika before it was sailing by its own propulsion over to Conor. We did not take off some 100 kilos like we normally do on a ship, but we took off more than 78 tons. And that was, of course, reducing the friction on the rig before it went over the ocean. But not the least, we removed also tons of species. And that was everything from crabs up to 8 centimeters to kelp that was 2 meters tall. And we prohibited from entering Canadian waters. And you can imagine here that if you came on land and you had with us just a banana traveling to Canada, you would be stopped for biosecurity reasons. But in this area, the ports can play a vital role to facilitate sustainable cleaning that allows non-native species to be captured in a safe manner before vessels and rigs are sailing over our ocean. I'll just stop by an optimistic picture from the Port of Toulon, from another successful collaboration with the French Navy, but not the least, the Port of Toulon. And I believe that the ports, they are vital in the green shift and the green transition from not only fuels, but also to contribute to save tons of CO2 and stop hitchhiking non-native species. And we will facilitate this in collaboration with ports that has a focus on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thor. A really impressive solution. Next, we have Samuel Stanton. Hi, Samuel. So I leave you the floor to present nature metrics.
Hi, thank you very much. I'll just bring up my screen share. Sorry, it's not showing the screen for some reason. Go for the screen share. Sorry about that. Is that coming through now?
Yep.
Brilliant.
Perfect.
Great, thank you very much. So, talking to you today about the use of DNA technologies in particularly in ports. So, a little bit of introduction to what eDNA is in terms of the technology, and then I'm going to provide a little case study because what we do is a little bit odd, and I think the easiest way to explain it is probably to give a case study example. So, before any of that, a little bit of background, I guess. What's the point? Well, I think for ports particularly, this is very pertinent. In the last 12, 24 months, corporates and ports and a lot of different organizations have become aware of the need to measure, monitor and mitigate their impacts on biodiversity. And things like reporting of ESG, the delivery of commitments of net positive impacts, design of, say, nature-based solutions into breakwaters and the like. All of these have biodiversity implications and biodiversity potential. But the problem with biodiversity when you compare it against something like carbon is it's really, really complicated. And we need tools which will make the complexity that you can see in front of you now straightforward. A lot of what we do at the moment will be based on this little wedge of the biodiversity wheel at the minute, looking at fish, looking at mammals, looking at those big charismatic species. But that's such a small slice of the picture. We need to be able to look wider than that. And that's where environmental DNA comes in. So essentially, this is looking at the biological fingerprints left behind in an environment by any organism as it moves through its environment. We call this environmental DNA. That'll remain detectable, whether that's in sediment or in water, for typically around about a day. So you can sample that water, you can sample that sediment, and you can use it to generate a list of all of the species that have been in that area within that time frame. And one of the nice things about this is that you can integrate that sampling within a conventional assessment. Say there's a new harbour wall being built, that'll require an impact assessment. As part of that, you can take subsamples of your main environmental samples and use those to look at environmental DNA. Exactly the same principle. Sample that environment, extract it, analyze it, and report it. But one of the really unique things about eDNA is how we can then visualize that data. So on the left, you've got what we would call a taxonomic heat tree. This is basically a way of exploding that data out into a visualization of that biodiversity in that one point. So on the left is an example of all the mammals and birds that were picked up from one single water sample in an estuarine environment. And that's fabulous for engaging stakeholders, for illustrating to people just what diversity you've got at a location. But maybe even more powerful than that is the fact that it gives more data. And when you have more data, you can do more with it. So the example on the right-hand side is an output from statistics. And this is a marine environment where we've got 3 water depths. And because we get so much more data from environmental DNA, we can show 3 different communities at 3 different water depths. And when you can start doing this, you can start looking at comparisons between sites. And this is where it becomes really interesting. So again, if we look at a port, say you've got an area of a port which has historically been used a lot, has a lot of human inputs, which have caused maybe some pollution problems. But there's a plan to regenerate that area or improve that area. So you can look at the overall biodiversity now at your baseline. You can look at a nearby site, which represents maybe a pristine example. And you can sample regularly and you can look at your whole biodiversity as you can see your project moving from a start point towards a change, towards an increase or a change in biodiversity. And ultimately, you can do that in a very simple way. Take the sample, look at the overall biodiversity, and just produce a metric. We've started off at 0.1. We're aiming to get to 0.5. And this is the data that will plug us in along the road. So for that sort of time and space comparison at scale, there's very few techniques to compare to it at the minute. And I'd like to give a quick example of that on that principle from a project that we've done on the south coast of the UK, where we had an oil refinery site which had an impacted area just outside of it, and a nature reserve site which was not impacted, presumed not impacted. And we did 2 things. We did an eDNA sample and we did a conventional sample. From the conventionals on the left, you can see no real statistical difference between those 2 sites. Plug in the eDNA data, suddenly we get 2 very distinct sites with the statistics. Look at the biodiversity, and you can see we've got some species which are only there at that pristine site, or that are much, much more diverse at that pristine site. Now we have an indicator organism, and we have an easy way of checking for it and checking the progress of our restoration from that first site to that pristine site. So it's a very, very quick run through of that, but basic conclusions is very easy. Anybody can collect the samples, which makes it very accessible and makes the data very clear and easy to engage stakeholders with. And ultimately, it's more data, better data means you can make a better decision with it.
Thierry, to close the pitch session, I will ask you to come and present Sinay.
Sure, thank you, Ludivine.
I think that you loved the last presentation, no? About data and eDNA.
Yeah.
More data for ports.
More data, exactly. And then you should have it on full screen. Perfect. Okay, great. So hi again. So now it's time to talk a bit about ourselves, but don't worry, you'll be involved in the presentation. Presentation which starts with some facts and thoughts. So what we've been talking about sustainability, and when we do, we usually talk about the preservation of the environment, which is great. So how the Earth will be in the near future. But sometimes we don't realize that we, and I say we as maritime stakeholders, as port companies, we might not be there in the near future. And honestly, nowadays, it's not irrelevant to ask ourselves if we will still be there in the future, even in 5 years. Will my sport still exist? Maybe, I don't know, a foreign company will have absorbed it. Maybe I'll bankrupt because vessels won't stop in my terminals anymore, or as I said before, I will suffer from a huge fine and maybe close my doors. And that, for the port, highlights the fact that consequences of a bad environmental policy are not a problem, but are deadly. I've listed in this slide a few examples of the problem the port can suffer because of that. But of course, there are many more. And I've decided to highlight one, which is the competitivity decline, because if we keep it on the number, on the money, which still drives pretty much everything today, we need to understand that the cost of managing the impact on the environment is not a waste of money, but it's an investment. Again, as I mentioned, I believe that being more sustainable is or should be equal as being more competitive. And lucky us, we don't have to panic because solution exists. And among others, Sinay is here to help. So who we are a tech company specialized in the knowledge of the oceans. We don't come from the tech, by the way, we come from the sea, which is great because I have the pleasure of sharing the office with developers and data scientists, but also biologists, marine observers, or environmental engineers. And we realized that before talking about hydrogen, even though it's important, before talking about electrification of berths, big and costly projects, simple actions could be taken to reduce the impact on the environment. A simple fact, if a container ship slow down to 1 or 2 knots max, it's thousands of tons of carbon emission less in the atmosphere. But where to start? And this is key about what we said before. It starts about sharing, but how? We have built at Sinay, I'm going to be a bit technical there, but it's a cloud-based big data platform. So in human language, it's a kind of a space accessible online everywhere, and where we have connected different sources of information to help the port better understand the impact of their activities. So the data can come from pretty much everywhere, sensors at sea like buoys, vessels itself with the AIS. We talked about ETA prediction, for instance, earlier, satellite imagery, metocean information, and also from our partners and third parties, actually, such as the DNA-based information coming from Nature Metrics that we've just heard about, thanks to Samuel. And good news is it's replicable. So the keyword there, and for what we are doing that, is real time, because if you are able to know what's going on, where and why within your port and within minutes, then you are able to report and share the information. You will definitely limit the impact of the activities, and as I said before, being more competitive. And to end the presentation, as a picture is worth 1,000 words, I'm going to reduce you a quick example. This is the hub, but as I said, it's replicable. So I made the hub for Leonard today, but it could be done for anyone who is using the technology. And from the hub, I will access to one of our module, which is called a real-time environmental monitoring. So kind of the topic of the day. And this is used by a port south of France called Port de la Nouvelle, and they are actually monitoring in real time 3 parameters, which are the quality of the water, of the air, and of the noise issue. I'm going to switch in English. And what it shows there normally is that you are supposed to see in real time what's going on in your port. You get alerted in real time when you have issues, meaning that when thresholds are reached and you may face problems. It's too bad it doesn't work. I don't know why. Maybe I have a connection issue. It's the demo effect. I should have cheated and do a video. I've chosen to do a live demo, but too bad for me. Maybe because I've said that, I'm going to be lucky. but no. Yes, hopefully. Give it 10 seconds. Come on. Normally, you should see a port with different sensors placed in strategic places. The use case here is that we call being a good neighbor, because the port is being extended. And to avoid citizens' complaint, as mentioned before, they've decided to open this platform to the public. So anyone through the municipality can go and check and see what's going on within the port when it comes to monitoring the pollution of water and air and noise problem within the city. But unfortunately, it's a bit slow, so it does not seems to appear. Ah, yes. Oof. Thank God. So here you have the port, and of course you can go deep dive into each module, water, acoustic, and air, and from there you will have graphs explaining how the turbidity is, what pollutants are highlighted, and you can run your own reports then, so you can share the information. Hope you enjoyed this quick demo. Should you want to know more, let me know. And thanks a lot for your attention.
Okay, so this is the end. A big thank you to all the panelists and for the presentation of all the different solutions. They're great, and we need you to transform this wonderful area, which is the ports. I hope it was inspiring, and that I hope that it will lead to future partnership or collaboration. And I need to say to you that it was a huge event cycle. It was really interesting. We met a lot of very interesting people and solutions. And at the end of the month, this month, we will share a study with the summaries of all the different events and with the contact of all the solutions and the panelists and the speaker to continue to have a great discussion on the topic. And do not hesitate to give us your feedbacks when you will receive the document, and we will be happy to talk about it. And feel free to share it in your network. So thank you, have a good evening, and bye-bye. See you soon at Leonard.